Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Jyothi and I'm working as Senior Scrum Master in CVent. Today I'll be talking about how having sprint goal can help in supporting changes which happens during the sprint journey. Okay? So I'll talk about first an example of a team wherein they didn't had sprint goal and the matrices which they used to have to compare whether their sprint is successful or not was using planned versus actual, which is like the number of stories which were planned in the sprint to complete, and out of those planned story, how much the team was able to complete. Okay, and then I'll take you through how having sprint goal could have supported the changes which team were uh, facing during their sprint journey, okay, which is of 2 weeks. And also I'll give you a few real sprint goal examples. Okay, so for this team, all work get pulled up at the sprint planning. We have all the key stakeholders out there, and based on team's capacity. So where by capacity I mean the number of days we have in sprint. Say we have 10 days, and out of 10 days, how many for how many days the team member is available. And in say for example, the team is available, teammates are available for 8 days, so the capacity for that teammate is 8 days. And now in that 8 days, how much of work this person is going to do on feature development, and how much of work this person is going to work on things like production bugs or security issues. Okay, so after calculating all this, say the capacity of the person came out to be 6 days. Okay, so we are considering, okay, for this sprint, the capacity for feature development is 60 days, right? So based on that, we pulled stuff in our sprint. So we have all the plans ready. We have the dates, okay, when the code would be merged to environment, when testing would be done, when are we going to release the services in these 10 days of a sprint. Now our expectation inevitably turns out to be wrong. We are just in on the third day of the sprint, and this is what happened. We didn't know what we didn't know while we were planning for the sprint, right? We were only focusing on team's capacity, team's bandwidth, the user stories which we have to work on. But we didn't think about these unknowns. There was a AWS outage, which it was impacting all the AWS customer. Then there were certain softwares which we were using whose license expired, right? So these were the things which we didn't consider while planning for that sprint. But as we all know, right, we thought while planning and flashing out those dates that we knew everything. But the true knowledge exists in knowing that you know nothing. There can always be some change which you cannot anticipate, right? How much you plan, right? Nobody knows that when there would be a AWS outage, right? The license part, still you can be prepared, because when you purchase a license, you have certain duration by which it is going to be active and it has to be reactivated. But as a human, we tend to forget those things and we realize while working on those projects, right? And then it's a little late when we get to know, oh, license has expired. So it takes a couple of days, and there you lose your time which you had planned for the sprint work. Okay. And since there are multiple teams who are working towards creating a different pieces of a product, so some of them went ahead and they um, uh, added certain feature which started the build to fail, right? So this was the mistake we didn't expect, right? We were thinking about an ideal condition. Okay, team A would be working on so and so piece, team B would be working on so and so piece, and there won't be any relationship where their code repository, etc., are concerned, right? But because both the teams, they were having their sprint planning, their discussions, etc., in a different time zone, right? And none of the scrum master thought to discuss about those dependency. Rather, we all were focused on just carving out a plan, a perfect plan, 10 days, okay, wherein we knew that, okay, there is not going to be any change, right? In fact, we didn't anticipate change, right? If we would have anticipated change, uh, we would have taken the precautionary measures, right? Also, estimate played a very important role, right? So while estimating, we didn't consider about some holidays, right? So why holidays affected our estimates? Because we have a concept of a repository owner. Okay, so in simple language, if there would always be a team who has contributed more to that, to a certain repository. Okay, so they are kind of our co-owners, and anything we merge to that repository, it has to go through them. Okay, and we forgot to consider their availability, the coordination which it would take for us to get things reviewed, right? The kind of review comment we'll get. Yeah, so everything we while giving the estimate, we just thought about, okay, development would take so and so time, testing would take so and so time, uh, and hence the estimate would be x, rather considering estimate to be x plus 1 or x plus 2, considering all these coordination, communication, um, time, uh, what do you say, time zone difference, etc. Or using, we thought that, okay, the UI component which has been displayed to us in the mock, that UI component is already there, and it would help us in taking the things ahead. But when we started working on that component, we realized that, okay, the feature or functionalities that this component has is not enough for the things which we want in our feature, right? So without considering all these things, we gave the estimates. So now we were in fourth, fifth day of the sprint, and we realized, oh, there are so many things which has happened. There has been certain unexpected PTOs. There was a US holiday which we didn't think about. There's a lot of the mocks, which was the components which were displayed to us in a mock. Those components are not enough to take care of our feature. The license has expired. There is AWS outage. So there is so many change which is happening. But did we plan for that change? Right? We didn't plan for that change. So we could not make the necessary changes. And this is what happened. Our sprint failed because when we were planning for the sprint, we were very optimistic. We were considering ideal conditions. We forgot to think about unknowns, right? We forgot to think that why, like, why these 10 stories are important. Okay, we didn't ask, like, okay, or is all the stories a must have for us, or there are some good to have or nice to have things, right? Now what happens? Team is the we consider the sprint has failed, because for us the parameter to judge the success of the sprint was plan versus delivered. We couldn't deliver maximum of the stories. We could hardly do one or two stories, right? Now we meet in a retrospective meeting, and what do you see? A blame game. Everybody is pointing finger to other person, right? Okay, so after that angry retrospective meeting, we all decided, right, what we'll do. We'll now we will, because everybody thought that the issue is with the planning or refinement. Remember, I gave you an example of estimates. So now what we started doing, we started planning more, started spending time in planning, started spending more time in analysis. We started taking those spikes, okay, for R&D work. And while doing refinement, now we start to consider, okay, we'll have development, we'll have testing, we'll have coordination, collaboration. Okay. So now out of that 60 days of capacity, we are again focusing more on meetings, discussion, analysis, etc. And sprint is high again. Okay. But what do you think? Is the problem solved? No. Why? Because we are still a mindset, or I would say for this sprint, the mindset is on preventing the change. So they are thinking that, okay, now we know that there's delay in PR review. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll take additional time for that coordination. Okay, or the license get expired. So what I'll do is, before picking any stories, I'll always check whether certain license are going to be expired or not. But do you all would have seen that your failures or such situations, they are not fixed. Okay, today you tend to focus on preventing a change, right? For example, the license example or the PR review example. Tomorrow you'll face with another change, right? So yeah, change is only constant. You cannot prevent the change. Change would happen. Okay. Now the question you may ask, okay, how can we support the changes? So the answer is sprint goal. Yeah. So out of that 10 things which we pick to work on a sprint, we have to understand that what is it that stakeholder care about most. Okay. And what is it that we all are working towards. I see usually with junior developers, their focus is only on, okay, their they get 2 or 3 stories to work on. They are just focusing on those stories, right? Rather thinking about bigger picture. So having a sprint goal would give them that path, okay, and give them that opportunity. Okay, for example, the 4 stories which we picked, out of the 4 stories, for one of the stories I had to work on ID, which is like intelligent, and the license of IntelliJ has expired, right? But there were 3 other stories wherein I didn't have to work on ID. It was more about some R&D work, some documentation work, which was helping us for the next sprint. Okay, so if we knew that our goal is to come up with that documentation, to come up with that R&D, we would have taken up that call uh, as a group, and we would have decided, okay, rather working on the story where we have dependency on license, which is not what stakeholders are more concerned about. For them, they want to know that how much of work would be required in the task which is planned for the upcoming sprint, for which one has to spike in the current sprint to come up with that estimates. Okay, it gives you clarity and focus on daily scrum, right? So now instead of just seeing, okay, how much of work is moving to done, the question you start asking is, okay, uh, what is the state of the story, okay, which is aligned with respect to our sprint goal. Do you need any help? Okay, how we can assist you? Okay, if you are stuck somewhere, the other person who is not having a story which is aligned to a sprint goal, because it's not necessary that all the items which you pick in the sprint, they would all be aligned to your sprint goal. Some of the things would be for the future sprints or upcoming sprints. Okay, so then that other person can step in and they can help you to ensure that. So here, what do you see now? Instead of working individually, we are working as a team, because we know for the sprint goal is so and so. For example, uh, also say sprint goal could be to integrate to integrate your unit test cases with Sonar Cube, okay, so that we can find the coverage, right? Why we want to know the coverage? Because now we want to focus on the lower level of the pyramid, right? Test pyramid. So we have like unit test cases, then you have your say system test cases, or and then you have your end-to-end test cases, right? So for you, the focus would be on the bottom layer to have a good coverage. So maybe for a couple of the sprints, you're not able to deliver things which is related directly related to the product. But what you're doing, you're creating an environment where after 1 or 2 sprints, by integrating your code with SonarQube, which would give you the code coverage, you are ensuring that going forward, whenever team is working on any feature, they are ensuring that we have a good test coverage at the lowest level. So yeah, sprint goal gives you purpose. It tells what stakeholders care about most, what is that we are working towards as a team, provide clarity and focus on daily Scrum. Also establish a benchmark for assessing progress, value, and outcomes. Same example which I gave you, right? So out of 10 story, 5 were aligned to our sprint goal, right? And there were 5 which were not aligned to sprint goal. It was just kind of R&D work which we were doing for certain things, right? So if somebody is focusing more on that part, you can always let that person know, hey, for us the focus is this. Okay, we'll take that once as a team we are able to complete these 5 stories. Now, so when there would be any change, right? There would be AWS as outage license has expired, etc. You'll be able to take that call, okay? And also you'll be able to expedite the fixes of those things. And even your Scrum Master would know, your product owner would know that these issues are impacting the team. They'll work with the required stakeholders. So here is a few examples of sprint goal. For example, fix the bug bash issue, right? So bug bash is like you get your feature tested with various teams. Okay, they use your product like your end user, and then they find the issues, right? So for example, if next sprint is the sprint wherein we had to release the product to the production, it's very important in the current sprint, the focus should be on fixing those issues which has come from the bug bash, right? So hence that's your goal. Okay? If team starts to focus on some other items in the sprint and thinks, oh, this is a low priority issue, it's bug bash, I'll pick it later, etc. They are missing out onto the next sprint's release duration. Okay, so you'll see the examples which I have listed out here. It consists of the goal which is related more to either product or to say testing or a Scrum related, right? So that's what I wanted to let you all guys know, that a sprint goal is not just only product uh, what do you say, product focused. Okay, so you can have a sprint goal as simple as, okay, UI automation for so and so features, so that we can start ahead and move towards a shift left testing approach, which is an organization level initiative which every sprint team has to follow, wherein we want to test the changes as early as possible in the development cycle. Okay, also as a product owner, dev lead, and as a scrum master, we have to work towards the epic readiness for the next quarter. So we are reaching the end of Q2, and now in Q3 we need to plan what exactly we have to work on, what is our team's focus, what is it that their stakeholders are expecting from these teams. So even that could be your sprint goal. So anything which gives you purpose, anything which lets you know what is important for the stakeholders, anything which lets you know what problem you are going to solve in the current sprint, is an example of the sprint goal. Okay, so in upcoming session, probably I can talk about the template which we follow to formulate the sprint goal. Okay, and how we come up. So sprint goal is not something which is just created by the development team. It's like, okay, everybody's participating, your scrum master, your product owner, your sprint team. So we all work together and we come up with the sprint goal. And now with a sprint goal, what how are we measuring the success of the sprint, right? So if we were able to accomplish our sprint goal, okay, sprint was successful, irrespective of that. Okay, out of the 10 stories, we were able to complete only 3, but those 3, they were aligned to our sprint goal. Though that 3 stories were assigned to 3 developers, but to accomplish that, all 6 developers or 5 developers came together. And why they came together? Because they understood that this is what is product owner wants. This is what stakeholders care about. Okay, so I'll quickly take you through all the slides once again, just to give a quick summary. Yeah, so these are the 3 things we talked about: journey of a sprint team, wherein the focus was on the deliverables, okay, the number of items which were done, okay, and then we talked about how having sprint goal gives it. See, not saying that there won't be unknown scenarios, there would be unknown scenarios, right? But having a sprint goal would give everyone purpose, right? It would give you a focus towards the most valuable items, right? So as a Scrum, we have to see what value we are generating, right? So everybody now, the issues which you see in sprint team, right? Okay, so there's no team bonding. People are working in isolation. Okay, when they come to daily stand up, they're focused only on, okay, what they worked on yesterday, what is it that they are going to work on today, or what they are going to work on the next day. But having the sprint goal, your conversation would be around that sprint goal now. Okay, for example, bug bash issues. Okay, so always now people would say, okay, guys, we have 10 bug bash issues. We've completed 2. There are 8. Can somebody take this bug bash issue number 2, 3, 4, 5? So why? Because they knew that if they are not able to complete the issue fixes, the sprint won't be successful, and most importantly, they won't be able to release their product in the next sprint. Also, another example of sprint goal which I gave you is increasing the coverage. Okay, going for TDD approach so that we can shift left our testing. Okay, why that's a goal for the sprint? Because that's an organization's initiative. And why that happened to be organization's initiative? Because testing early would give you quick feedback. Okay? Yeah, and we covered some real sprint goal example, and I left out some of the things from the sprint goal because of business sensitive reasons. But yeah, whenever you get a sprint now, what is it that you can ask your product owner or your team, so that that helps them to come up with this sprint goal? Is always ask them, what do you think is the purpose of this sprint? What is it that they want the team to focus on? What is it that the stakeholders care most about? What is it that they would work on, which would give in the ROI, which is return on investment, as quickly as uh, uh, this 10 days gets over, right? So asking those things, asking, okay, now this is the sprint goal. How would I measure that our sprint goal has been accomplished, right? So you can talk about certain matrices. For example, a simple matrix could be, okay, if we would have considered integrating your code with Sonar Cube and measuring the code coverage. So probably the goal would be, yes, all the projects are integrated and we have a document prepared with us, which could be shared with other team who can follow the same step, and they can what do you say, integrate their code with Sonar Cube. Or it could be, okay, for this sprint, our goal is to increase the code coverage of our services, right? So have that benchmark. Okay, 80% is what we are going to target. So whatever feature team works on the current sprint, or whatever feature they own, they can ensure that, okay, in this sprint, once we come to a closure, if we see the reports, Sonar Cube reports, the coverage should be 80%. Okay, so on day 1, you won't be able to come up with a well-formed sprint goal, but over a practice and a period of time, you'll be able to formulate that sprint goal. Okay, so thank you everyone. I hope from this session now you learn that how being a Scrum team you can support change, and let's not focus on preventing change, and let's not focus on measuring team success by numbers like plan versus actual, etc. Okay, so thank you everyone.